"You're wrong, son." That's what I told him when he called, saying he'd sold everything that was ours, everything I'd built with the sweat of my brow for over 50 years, including my late wife's grave. How can a son do this to his own father? At that moment, this old man's heart nearly stopped. My name is Anthony Gerald Peterson. I'm 83 years old, well-lived despite the calluses on my hands and the back pain that's been my companion. I worked my whole life as a rancher in Bakersfield, California. Started as a ranch hand, then became a foreman until I could buy my first piece of land. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Today, or rather, until yesterday, I had a ranch with 600 acres, 350 head of Angus cattle, a main house I built with my late wife Margaret, and I even bought her a perpetual plot so she could rest in peace. All with tremendous sacrifice. My life was never easy. No, sir. I always woke before sunrise, with the stars still shining in the sky. I remember like it was yesterday the smell of earth wet with morning dew, mounting my horse and going to check the cattle, inspect fences, supervise the hands. Even after things improved, I never stopped getting my hands dirty. As my father used to say, the owner's eye fattens the cattle. And it sure did. I built an estate that could support 5 generations without worry. But ingratitude tastes bitter as bile. Before continuing this story, I'd like to thank Comeback Stories channel for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. And I ask you who are watching to please subscribe to the channel, leave your like, comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Every day there's a new story here, and believe me, many of them will make you rethink how you treat your elders, your parents, your grandparents. But back to my son Richard's phone call. When he said he'd sold everything and was taking me to a nursing home, I laughed. It wasn't from joy, it was from desperation mixed with a certainty that he didn't have, because I had an ace up my sleeve that my own son didn't know about. I was born in 1942 in a small town called Dusty Creek, near Bakersfield. It was so small it barely showed up on maps. My father had a small farm where he grew a bit of everything: corn, potatoes, wheat. We lived simply, but we never went hungry. We were 7 siblings, and I was the oldest. From early on, I learned to wake with the roosters crow and help with the farm work. School was a luxury. I only studied through 3rd grade. After that, the hoe became my notebook and the scorching sun my teacher. At 15, I left home for the first time. Went to work at Colonel Sebastian's ranch, a respected man in the region. Started as a helper, doing a bit of everything: cleaning stalls, feeding animals, fixing fences. Over time, I learned about cattle. I had a special way with animals, especially the wilder ones. "This boy's got good hands," the foreman would say. By 20, I was responsible for all the herd management. The work was hard but rewarding. I'd wake at 4 a.m., drink strong black coffee, and head to the corral. The smell of fresh manure, the cattle lowing, the dew soaking my leather boots. That was my life for decades. On vaccination days, it was double duty. We'd gather the cattle in the pen, separate them into groups, and vaccinate them one by one. Often I'd return home after sunset, back aching, but satisfied I'd done my duty. It was at a church social that I met my Margaret. It was 1965, a 4th of July celebration. She had hair black as night, honey-colored eyes, and a smile that lit up the entire yard. Irish descent, with a strong temperament but an even bigger heart. When I first saw her dancing in that yellow flowered dress, I knew she was the one. We courted for a year, and in 1966 we married. Simple ceremony at the main church, followed by lunch in her parents' backyard. We didn't have much, but we had love and the will to work. We started our life in a rented house in Bakersfield. I'd already gotten a job as foreman at Good Hope Ranch. The owner, Mr. Anderson, was a fair man who valued work well done. Margaret soon got pregnant with our first child, Richard. Then came 2 more, Maria and James. Raising 3 children on a foreman's salary wasn't easy, but we made do. Margaret sewed for others, made homemade bread to sell, and still cared for the children with all her love. The sacrifices were many. I remember once when Richard, at 7 years old, needed appendix surgery. We didn't have health insurance, and Medicaid was different back then. I sold my only wristwatch and a radio I'd gotten from Mr. Anderson to pay for the surgery. Another time, when Maria needed braces, I saved for almost a year, even cutting out my only luxury, rolling tobacco. For James to go to college for agriculture, we sold a lot we'd bought as an investment. I always put my children first. In 1980, the big opportunity came. Mr. Anderson was getting old and wanted to move to the city, closer to his children. He offered me the chance to buy part of the ranch, 150 acres, with easy payments. It was my dream coming true. Margaret and I talked it over extensively, calculated every penny, and decided to take the risk. I signed the promissory note with my hand trembling from emotion. That land was now mine. I worked double. During the day I took care of my piece of land, and at night I still did contract work on other ranches. Margaret started making cheese and sweets to sell at the town's farmers market. The kids, now older, also helped after school. Richard, at 14, already knew everything about cattle. Maria took care of the vegetable garden, and James helped with bookkeeping. He was always good with numbers. Little by little we grew. In 1985 I bought another 75 acres from a neighbor. In 1990, another 150. The herd kept growing. First 50 head, then 100, 200. We built a new main house with a wraparound porch, just like Margaret had always dreamed. We planted oak trees along the entrance road that looked beautiful when they leafed out. We bought our first tractor, then a pickup, and even a car for Margaret to go to town. The sweat was paying off. By 2010 we had a respected ranch in the region. The children grew up. Richard married Denise, a city girl, daughter of business owners. Maria became a teacher and moved to Sacramento. James finished his agriculture degree and went to work for a multinational seed company in Fresno. The ranch got too big for just me and Margaret, so I called Richard to be my partner. After all, one day everything would be his and his siblings. That's when things started to change. Very slowly, almost without me noticing. Richard and Denise started spending more time in the city than on the ranch. When they showed up, it was always in a hurry, always talking about business and investments in the city. Dad, ranching is a thing of the past. The future is in technological agribusiness and partnerships with big companies. I didn't understand much of these modern terms, but I trusted my son. After all, he'd studied more than I had. In 2018, Margaret got sick. Cancer. It was like the sky had fallen on my head. We fought for 2 years, going back and forth to hospitals, paying for expensive treatments. I sold part of the ranch to pay the medical expenses, but I don't regret it. I'd do it all again for her. When she passed in 2020, I bought the best plot in the municipal cemetery. Margaret deserves to rest like a queen, I thought. That's when the change in Richard became more evident. He barely showed up at his mother's funeral, stayed less than an hour, and said he had an important meeting. That hurt more than a slap in the face. After Margaret passed, the ranch felt too big for just me. The silence of the house at night was torture. I'd spend hours on the porch looking at the stars, remembering her. The oak trees we'd planted together bloomed that year like never before. It almost seemed like she was sending me a message from heaven, "Keep going, Anthony." Richard started showing up more at the ranch, but it wasn't out of missing his father. I soon realized he had his eye on the estate. "Dad, you're already in your 80s, you need to rest. Let me handle the business now." At first I thought it was good. After all, I was tired, my joints aching, my spine complaining from so much hard work. But something in his lip didn't sit right with me. That same year, 2020, came the pandemic. The world turned upside down. We couldn't even visit relatives anymore. Going to town became an ordeal. Richard said it was dangerous for me because of my age and offered to take care of everything. "You stay home, Dad. I'll handle the business, make the payments, check the accounts." That's when his plan began. First, he convinced James, my youngest, to sell his share of the inheritance. Dad, James needs money to start a consulting company in Fresno. It's his dream and we need to help him. Without suspecting anything, I signed the papers he brought me. Only later did I find out Richard paid his brother peanuts, well below the real value. Then it was Maria's turn. She wants to buy a house in Sacramento. Needs a down payment. More papers, more signatures. I trusted my son. Of course I did. He was blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh. How could I imagine my own son was screwing me over? In January 2023, Richard showed up with an idea that intrigued me. Dad, we need to protect the estate. There are a lot of thieves out there, a lot of scammers. Let's put everything in my name, just so you don't have to worry about bureaucracy. In practice, nothing changes. That day, something inside me lit up an alert. Richard, I need to think about it, I replied. It was around this time I started noticing other changes. The ranch's oldest employees, people who'd worked with me for over 30 years, started getting laid off. Dad, they're too expensive and don't produce like they used to, Richard would justify. Old Pete, who was like a brother to me, foreman of the ranch since I started, was fired without explanation. When I went to complain to Richard, he said I was getting senile, that I'd never authorized such a thing. It was like they were erasing me from my own history. The neighbors also started telling me strange things. Richard was negotiating parts of the ranch without consulting me. Land I'd conquered with so much sacrifice was being sold for pennies. Mr. Anthony, yesterday your son showed that creek area to people from the development company, my neighbor Gerald told me. They want to buy everything by the end of the month. One morning in April 2023, I received a visit from John, the manager of Bank of America in Bakersfield. A serious man I trusted, who'd handled my accounts for over 20 years. Mr. Anthony, I came personally because I'm worried. Did you really authorize all these transfers? When he showed me the statements, I nearly fell off my chair. Over $2 million had left the ranch account in the past 6 months. Money I didn't even know had been moved. No, John, I didn't authorize any of that. My voice came out trembling, mixing anger and desperation. Mr. Anthony, the transfers were made with your password and digital signature. You gave your son the password. It was like a slap in the face. Yes, I'd given him the password to pay ranch bills, employees, suppliers, but I never imagined he'd use it against me. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, feeling a tightness in my chest that wasn't just sadness, it was physical pain. Margaret, what do I do? I asked, looking at her picture on the nightstand. It was like she answered me, Anthony, open your eyes. Our son is no longer that boy we raised. The next day I woke up determined to confront Richard. I called him, but it just went to voicemail. I sent messages, nothing. 3 days later, when I was almost ready to go to the police, he showed up at the ranch. He came with Denise and 2 men I'd never seen in my life. One of them carried a briefcase full of papers. Dad, this is Dr. Paul, attorney, and this is Robert, real estate broker. We need to talk. We sat on the porch, that same porch where Margaret and I had spent so many afternoons watching the sun set behind the hills. The attorney opened the briefcase and started pulling out a bunch of documents. Mr. Anthony, these are just some formalities to regularize the property situation. What situation? What properties? I asked, already feeling my blood boil. That's when Richard took command of the conversation. Dad, you're too old to handle all this. The ranch is a lot of work, lots of bills to pay, lots of problems to solve. You deserve to rest. And who said I want to rest? This ranch is my life. It was, Dad. It was your life. Now you need to accept that things have changed. The attorney pushed a paper in front of me. Just sign here, Mr. Anthony. You transfer total administration of the assets to your son, who will take care of everything so you can live peacefully. I took the paper and read it carefully, word by word. It was a power of attorney, giving Richard full powers to sell, trade, administer all my assets. I would be practically dead while alive, with no rights to anything. I'm not signing this, I said, returning the paper. That's when I saw a transformation in my son's face. That boy I taught to ride horses, who I carried on my shoulders when he was little, who used to cry in my lap when he got hurt, now looked at me with contempt. Dad, you don't have a choice. We've already sold 70% of the ranch. The money is already invested in other businesses. Either you sign, or we'll have to take more drastic measures. What measures, Richard? Are you going to commit me by force? Say I'm crazy? My voice came out louder than I intended. If necessary, yes. Denise has an uncle who's a doctor. He can attest that you're no longer capable of managing your assets. Then the court gives me guardianship and we solve this another way. At that moment, I felt like an abyss had opened between me and my own son. How could he be doing this to me after everything Margaret and I had sacrificed for him? Get out of my house, I said quietly but firmly. What? Get out of my house, I shouted, standing up from my chair. And take these vultures with you. This ranch is mine. I built every piece of it with my sweat and no one's going to take me away from here while I'm alive. Richard laughed. A cold, calculating laugh. Dad, you don't understand. The ranch isn't yours anymore. You signed the transfer 6 months ago. I never signed anything like that. Yes, you did. Remember those papers to protect the estate? That was the ownership transfer. The ranch is now in my name. I felt like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. The porch walls seemed to spin around me. Margaret had been right. Our son was no longer that boy we'd raised with so much love. I'm going to sue you, Richard. I'm going to take this all the way. You can try, Dad. Your word against mine. An old man in his 80s, possibly with Alzheimer's, against a respected businessman in the region. Who do you think the judge will believe? The following weeks were a nightmare. Richard cut off my access to bank accounts, canceled my credit cards, and started selling the ranch cattle without consulting me. The remaining employees were instructed not to obey me. It was like I'd become a ghost in my own house. I tried talking to Maria and James, but both were on their brother's side. Dad, Richard just wants what's best for you, Maria would say over the phone. The ranch is a lot of work. You need peace at your age. James wouldn't even take my calls. It was during this time I discovered just how far my son's greed went. Through an old friend at the bank, I learned Richard had taken out huge loans using the ranch as collateral. The money didn't go to improvements or business investments, but to buy luxury properties in Sacramento and Los Angeles, in his and Denise's names. Mr. Anthony, he even mortgaged the main house. Mario, my bank friend, told me in secret. If he doesn't make the payments, you could lose everything. The last straw came when I discovered Richard had started selling Margaret's perpetual grave plot. That's right, he sold his own mother's grave. I went to the cemetery on a Friday, like I did every week to bring flowers to my deceased wife, and the administrator stopped me. I'm sorry, Mr. Anthony, but this plot now belongs to the Rodriguez family. Mr. Richard signed the transfer 2 weeks ago. I went home devastated. I sat on the porch and cried like a child. Margaret, forgive our son. He doesn't know what he's doing. But deep in my heart, I knew Richard knew exactly what he was doing. It was that night I received the call. It was almost 10 p.m. I was already getting ready for bed when the phone rang. Dad, tomorrow I'm coming to pick you up. I sold the house, the cattle, the land, and even Mom's grave. Pack your bags. I'm taking you to Sunset Manor Nursing Home in Sacramento. I've already worked everything out with them. My heart nearly stopped. So this was it? After a lifetime of work, sacrifice, unconditional love, my destiny was to end up in a nursing home, abandoned by my own son. That's when something inside me changed. It wasn't sadness or disappointment anymore. It was fierce determination, a strength I didn't even know I still had. I laughed. I laughed loud with a guffaw that must have scared Richard on the other end of the line. "You're wrong, son," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "Because I have evidence against you that you never would have imagined existed." I finished, feeling a wave of satisfaction imagining Richard's surprised face. The silence on the other end of the line confirmed my words had hit home. When he finally spoke, his voice no longer had that arrogance from before. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "What deed?" "The original deed to Yellow Oak Ranch, signed by Mr. Anderson in 1980 and registered at the courthouse. The one that transfers ownership to my name and cannot be sold or transferred without my notarized signature." "But I have a copy," Richard stammered. "You have a forged copy. That's what the fake that won't stand up to simple forensic analysis." "And you know how I'm sure of this?" "Because when I bought this land from Mr. Anderson, he insisted on including a special clause written by hand in the margin of the document. A clause that said, 'This land is sacred as the sweat of those who work it.' That phrase is in the original deed, which is very well kept. In your fake copies, I bet there's nothing like that." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could even hear Richard's heavy breathing, calculating the size of the problem he'd gotten himself into. "Besides," I continued, "I have recordings of all our conversations from recent months, including this one, where you admit to selling your mother's grave and planning to commit me to a nursing home by force." This part was a lie. I hadn't recorded anything, but I needed to buy time, make Richard back down while I put my plan into action. "Dad, let's talk properly. You misunderstood everything. I only want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" "Selling the land I cultivated for 40 years? Selling your mother's grave, leaving me penniless in old age? Is that what you call wanting what's best for me?" "I can explain everything, Dad. Tomorrow we'll talk calmly." "No, Richard. Tomorrow I'll be busy. I have a meeting with my lawyer at 9 a.m. And then I'm going to the police to file a complaint for fraud, document forgery, and attempted coercion. If you come here, you'll find locked doors and police waiting. You wouldn't do that to your own son." His voice was now almost a whisper. "No, Richard. The question is, how can you do this to your own father? Now excuse me. I need to rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." I hung up the phone, feeling my hands tremble. Part of me was terrified by what I'd just done. I'd openly challenged my son, playing a risky bluff. But another part of me felt strange relief, as if I'd finally awakened from a nightmare. In truth, I didn't have any deed kept safe. The original document was in the ranch office safe, which Richard certainly already had access to. I also didn't have a lawyer or recordings. I was an 83-year-old man, alone against my own son and his accomplices. But I had something they didn't have, loyal friends built over a lifetime of honest work. That same night, I called old Pete, my former foreman whom Richard had fired. "Pete, I need your help. It's urgent." "What do you think friends are for, Mr. Anthony? Just tell me." I quickly explained the situation. Old Pete didn't seem surprised. "I already suspected that son of yours was up to something. Since Miss Margaret passed, he changed. Got too ambitious. You can count on me, boss." Next, I called John, the bank manager. "John, remember that conversation we had about the suspicious transfers? I need your help to prove I didn't authorize any of that." "Mr. Anthony, it's going to be difficult. The bank protocols, the digital signatures. John, we've known each other for over 20 years. You know I'd never authorize transfers that size without consulting you personally. Let me tell you what's really happening." After hearing the whole story, John was silent for a few seconds. "I'll see what I can do, Mr. Anthony. I don't promise anything, but I'll try." My last call was to Mrs. Sarah, the courthouse secretary. It was past midnight, but I knew she usually stayed up late. "Mrs. Sarah, sorry for the hour. It's Anthony Peterson." Mr. Anthony, is there a problem? Yes, Mrs. Sarah, and a big one. I need to verify if there was any recent registration of ownership transfer for my ranch. Let me check the system. Yes, there's a registration made 2 months ago. Yellow Oak Ranch was transferred to Richard Peterson's name. My heart sank, but I was already expecting this. And the signature? How was this transfer made? It has your digitized signature, Mr. Anthony, and notarized acknowledgement. Mrs. Sarah, that signature is fake. I never signed that transfer, and you know very well I always go personally to the courthouse for any important document. The silence on the other end made me anxious. Mr. Anthony, that's a very serious accusation. Document forgery is a crime. I know, Mrs. Sarah, and that's exactly what my son did. I need your help to prove it. A few more seconds of silence. Come to the courthouse tomorrow at 8 a.m., before opening. Bring old documents with your signature. We'll compare. I spent the rest of the night awake, planning every step. At dawn, I gathered old documents, family photographs, cattle purchase receipts, everything that could prove the ranch was mine by right. I even found the original purchase contract signed by Mr. Anderson in 1980, which I kept in a memory box along with Margaret's photographs. At 7:30 a.m., old Pete arrived with his old pickup to get me. We went first to the courthouse, where Mrs. Sarah was already waiting for us. Mr. Anthony, I compared your signature on old documents with the one on the transfer registration. There are clear differences. Look at how the A is made and how the T is crossed. They're small details, but an expert can identify easily. And what can we do now, Mrs. Sarah? I'll issue a certificate declaring there's suspicion of document forgery and that the registration is under analysis. This will prevent any new transfer or sale for at least 30 days. Enough time for you to file a lawsuit. From the courthouse, we went straight to the office of Dr. Anthony, a retired lawyer who'd been my friend for decades. Even though he wasn't practicing anymore, he knew exactly what needed to be done. Anthony, this is a classic case of family fraud. Unfortunately, it's more common than you'd imagine. Children who take advantage of elderly parents, forge documents, or divert money. But you have something most victims don't have: evidence and witnesses. Dr. Anthony drafted a petition right there requesting an injunction to block any transaction involving the ranch and my assets. He also prepared a criminal complaint for document forgery and fraud. We'll need an active lawyer to file this. I know the perfect guy's Dr. Marcus, my former partner's son. He specializes in family law and has experience with cases like yours. At 10 a.m., we were already at Dr. Marcus's office, a young lawyer about 35, but with a firm and determined look. Mr. Anthony, we'll act fast. Today I'll file the petitions. The county judge is Dr. Paul Rivera, a serious man who doesn't tolerate this kind of scam. I'm sure he'll grant the injunction today. And how much does all this cost, Doctor? Because my son blocked my accounts. I don't have access to my money. Don't worry about that now. You'll pay me when we recover your assets. Consider it my investment in justice. While Dr. Marcus handled the legal part, John, the bank manager, called me with news. Mr. Anthony, I analyzed your account access logs. All the large transfers were made from the same IP address, which doesn't correspond to your computer or cell phone. Besides, some were made at times when, according to our camera records, you were physically at the branch handling other matters. It's clear proof of unauthorized access. And what does this mean, John? It means I can issue a technical report attesting to suspected fraud. With this, we can preventively block the accounts and start a process to contest the transfers. I can't promise we'll recover everything, but at least we'll prevent more money from being diverted. At noon, we received news that the judge had granted the injunction. The ranch was officially blocked from any transaction, and bank accounts related to the estate were also blocked. Richard couldn't sell anything more or make new transfers. It was then my cell phone rang. It was him. Dad, what did you do? There's a court officer here at my office with a summons. They blocked my account. How can you do this to me? No, Richard. The question is, how can you do this to me, to your own father? To your mother's memory? This isn't going to end like this. I'm going to hire the best lawyers. I'm going to prove you're senile, that you don't know what you're doing. Do that, son. And I'm going to show the judge the evidence of forgery, witness testimonies, and the bank report proving fraudulent access to my accounts. Let's see who the judge will believe. The anger in his voice gave way to an almost pleading tone. Dad, let's resolve this as family. We don't need judges and lawyers. We're blood of the same blood. Too late, Richard. You chose this path when you decided to rob me. Now we're going to see it through to the end. The following weeks were intense. Richard really hired expensive lawyers from Los Angeles who tried everything to annul the injunction, but the evidence was too solid. The forensic analysis confirmed my signature on the transfer documents was fake. The bank report proved unauthorized account access, and testimonies from Old Pete and other former employees revealed how Richard had systematically isolated and manipulated me after Margaret's death. The case gained attention in the region. Many other children were doing the same to their elderly parents, and my story became a symbol of resistance. The local newspaper published a front-page story, 83-year-old man fights in court against his own son's scam. But the hardest blow to Richard came from where he least expected it, his own wife, Denise. When she realized the house of cards was collapsing, that accounts were blocked and there was real risk of criminal conviction, Denise sought me out in secret. Mr. Anthony, I came to ask forgiveness. I knew what Richard was doing, but I was afraid to oppose him. He changed a lot in recent years, became obsessed with money, with status. He's no longer the man I married. Why are you telling me this now, Denise? Because I can't stand living with this guilt anymore. And because I have evidence that can help you. Denise opened her purse and took out a flash drive. Here are copies of emails where Richard discusses with Dr. Paul, that lawyer who came to the ranch, how to forge your signature and transfer assets without you noticing. There are also spreadsheets detailing where every cent he took from your accounts went. Why did you keep this, Denise? At first it was just to protect myself, in case he ever tried to blame me. Later I realized it was the right thing to do. My parents raised me better than this, Mr. Anthony. They'd be ashamed if they knew what I allowed to happen. The evidence provided by Denise was the final nail in the coffin of Richard's pretensions. The judge not only maintained the injunction but ordered immediate return of all diverted assets and values. And most importantly, he prohibited Richard from approaching me or the ranch without judicial authorization. The criminal process is still ongoing, but the prosecutor has already indicated he'll seek imprisonment. Richard could get 4 to 8 years in prison for fraud, document forgery, and embezzlement. As for Margaret's grave, we discovered the sale was never actually finalized. Richard had received a deposit, but the plot was still legally in my name. The Rodriguez family, when they learned the story, immediately gave up the purchase and even offered to testify on my behalf. News of the legal victory came on a June afternoon in 2023. I was on the ranch porch, watching the sunset, when Dr. Marcus arrived with an envelope in his hand. Mr. Anthony, here's the final injunction decision. The judge ordered cancellation of all fraudulent transfers, full return of diverted values, and maintenance of ownership in your name, with a special clause preventing any new transfer without judicial supervision. I received the document with trembling hands. There was in black and white confirmation that justice, even if slow, still worked. And there's one more thing, continued Dr. Marcus, taking another paper from the envelope. We found buyers for the lands Richard sold illegally. They're ranchers from the region who, when they learned your story, offered to return the areas for the same value they paid, no profit, no speculation. Pure respect for a man who dedicated his life to the land. That night I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The next day I went to the cemetery to bring flowers to Margaret. I sat next to her grave and told her everything that had happened. See, my dear? We won. Our ranch is safe. Our work wasn't in vain. While I spoke with her, I saw a yellow butterfly land on the headstone. I watched for a few seconds until it flew and landed on my shoulder. Margaret always said yellow butterflies were messengers of good news. Message received, my love, I whispered, feeling a peace I hadn't felt since she left. The case's repercussion caused waves I could never have imagined. The judge ordered Richard to return every cent diverted with interest and monetary correction. Buyers who had acquired parts of the ranch in good faith were reimbursed by Richard himself, who had to sell the luxury properties he'd bought in Sacramento and Los Angeles. Maria and James, my other children, who initially had sided with their brother, came to me ashamed. Dad, forgive us, said Maria with tears in her eyes. Richard convinced us you were getting senile, that it was better for everyone if he took over the business. We never imagined he was robbing you. And about selling your share of the inheritance, was that also his idea? He said you had agreed, explained James. He even showed a document with your signature authorizing the sale. He said the money would be invested and everyone would benefit. We only discovered the truth when the case went to court. I looked at my two younger children, sitting in front of me like kids who'd just broken a vase. It was hard to know how much they really knew or suspected, but deep down they were still my children. What's done is done, I finally replied. You believed your brother, and that's understandable. Family is supposed to trust each other. The problem is Richard betrayed that trust. Can you forgive us, Dad? Asked Maria, holding my hand. I already have, daughter, but it'll take time before trust comes back completely. And what about Richard? He's destroyed, Dad, interrupted James. Denise filed for divorce. His company is in shambles since clients discovered what he did, and he might end up in jail. That was his choice, James. Every choice has consequences. The following week, I received a letter from Richard. It wasn't an apology, as I might have expected, but a series of accusations and justifications. According to him, I'd always favored his siblings, never recognized his value, and everything he did was take what he deserved. I read the letter several times, trying to find in those bitter words some trace of the boy I had raised with so much love, but I only found resentment and selfishness. I put the letter in a drawer and decided I'd respond when the dust settled, when perhaps we could both see the situation more clearly. Time passed and life on the ranch slowly returned to normal. I rehired old Pete as foreman and brought back other old employees Richard had dismissed. Together we started recovering what had been lost, not just in material terms, but also the spirit of the place. The neighbors, who had distanced themselves during the period when Richard controlled everything, came back to visit the house. Sunday lunches on the porch, a tradition Margaret had loved so much, were resumed. And I, at 83, rediscovered the pleasure of seeing cattle grazing peacefully in fields I'd helped shape. Now, months after that phone call that changed everything, I'm here on the porch of Yellow Oak Ranch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The gentle breeze brings the smell of freshly cut grass and the lowing of cattle returning to the corral. I'm 83 years old, but I feel rejuvenated, like I've been given a new chance at life. This whole story made me reflect a lot about life, about family, about the values we pass to our children. Where did we go wrong? That question tormented me for many nights. Margaret and I always gave the best to our children. We always taught the value of honest work, respect, integrity. How could Richard stray so far from that path? Maybe we were naive to believe example would be enough. Maybe we should have talked more about money, about the value of things beyond the material. Or maybe it's just human nature. That tendency some have to always want more than they need, more than they deserve, more than is fair. What I know is I can't blame myself eternally for my son's mistakes. He made his choices and now needs to live with the consequences. The criminal process is still ongoing, but his lawyer managed to reach an agreement with the prosecutor's office. Instead of going to jail, Richard will serve his sentence under house arrest, doing community service and paying a heavy fine. Part of me feels relieved about this. Despite everything, he's still my son and I can't wish for him to be imprisoned. As for my other children, Maria and James, our relationship is rebuilding slowly. They visit me more frequently now. They bring the grandchildren to spend weekends on the ranch. The kids love riding horses, fishing in the pond, watching the cattle being milked in the morning. These are moments that fill me with joy and make me think that maybe, despite everything, something good can come from this whole story. Maria is even thinking about leaving her job in Sacramento and coming back to Bakersfield. Dad, after everything that happened, I realized how empty life in the big city is, she told me the other day. I want my children to grow up knowing their roots, knowing where they came from. James continues in Fresno, but now comes every month to spend a weekend on the ranch. He and old Pete are implementing new pasture management techniques, things James learned in agriculture college that are significantly increasing herd productivity. It's good to see his technical knowledge combining with Pete's practical experience. The two get along very well. As for Richard, well, I haven't had news of him for almost 2 months. The last time I heard something was through Denise, who came to visit me after finalizing the divorce. According to her, he sold everything he had in Sacramento and moved to Montana to start life over far from the comments and disapproving looks. Part of me hopes that one day he'll find peace and wisdom to understand the harm he caused, and who knows, come back to ask for forgiveness. The door will always be opened not for him to return to administering the ranch or have access to the estate, but so we can maybe rebuild some kind of relationship. Life taught me that nothing is black and white. Richard did terrible things, but he was also a victim of his own greed, his own unbridled ambition. As a father, I can't help wondering if I could have done something different, if I could have noticed the signs earlier. But as Father John told me, Mr. Anthony, even God gave free will to his children, and look how many chose the wrong path. One of the most important lessons I took from this experience was about trust. Trusting is necessary. Living without trusting anyone is a sad and lonely existence, but trusting doesn't mean being naive. Even with family, maybe especially with family, you need to keep your eyes open, establish clear limits, document everything not out of distrust, but out of prudence. Another lesson was about the importance of building a support network throughout life. If it weren't for old Pete, John from the bank, Mrs. Sarah from the courthouse, Dr. Anthony, Dr. Marcus, and so many other friends I made over decades of honest work, I'd probably be in some nursing home today, abandoned and forgotten. It was these people, these bonds built with respect and reciprocity, that saved me when my own family betrayed me. Today my life is reorganized. I divided ranch administration between old Pete, who handles day-to-day operations, and a professional administrator recommended by Dr. Marcus, who takes care of the financial and bureaucratic part. All important decisions go through me, and all documents are checked by the lawyer before I sign anything. It's a system that works well and gives me security. I also made a new will with very specific clauses about how the estate should be divided and administered after my passing. Maria and James will inherit equal parts of the ranch, but with one condition: the land can't be sold for at least 15 years after my death. I want my grandchildren to have the chance to know and love this place like I loved it. As for Richard, I didn't completely disinherit him. That would be feeding more rancor and bitterness. He'll receive a small part, enough to live with dignity, but without access to administration or decision-making power over the estate. I also made sure to set aside part of the ranch, about 50 acres, to create an environmental reserve in Margaret's name. It's a beautiful area with native forest, springs, and incredible bird diversity. She always loved that piece of land. She said it was where she felt closest to God. Now that area is legally protected and can't be deforested or exploited, regardless of who owns the ranch in the future. In recent months, I've also gotten closer to the community. I created a project to teach young people from town about sustainable ranching, management techniques that respect the environment while ensuring productivity. Every Saturday morning, a group of teenagers comes to the ranch for practical classes. Seeing the interest in their eyes, the excitement when they manage to do something with their own hands, gives me enormous satisfaction. And so I live, one day at a time, grateful for the time I still have. Every morning I wake before sunrise and go to the porch to watch the day begin. I drink my black coffee, looking at the mist rising from the pastures, listening to the birds singing that announce a new day. Then I mount my horse, a gentle bay I call Thunder, and make a round of the property. It's not out of necessity anymore, like it used to be. It's more for pleasure, for the joy of feeling the wind on my face and knowing this land is still mine. In the afternoon, I usually receive visits, neighbors, old friends, sometimes even people who heard my story in the newspaper or on television and come asking for advice about similar situations. I try to help as I can, sharing what I learned. Don't wait until it's too late, I always say. Protect what's yours while you still have strength to fight. At night, after dinner, I sit again on the porch and talk with Margaret. I know it might seem like an old man's foolishness, but I feel she's here with me, especially when the sky is starry like she liked. I tell her how my day was, what the grandchildren did, how the oak plantation we started together is doing. And I always end by thanking her for being my companion on this journey, for giving me the strength I didn't even know I had. If there's a message I'd like to leave for those listening, it's this: it's never too late to fight for what's yours, for what you built with sweat and dedication. Age doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the chances seem small. It doesn't matter if the opponent seems stronger or smarter. Truth and justice have their own power, and sooner or later they prevail. And for the younger ones, advice from someone who's lived a lot: build your estate. Yes, work hard, achieve your dreams, but remember the greatest treasure you can accumulate in life is true relationships, sincere friendships, people's respect. That's what saved me when everything seemed lost. Last week I received a letter. The envelope had no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting. It was from Richard. Unlike the last one, this didn't have accusations or justifications. It was an apology, simple, direct, sincere. Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me now. Maybe never. I just want you to know I'm trying to change, trying to be the man you and Mom raised me to be. One day, if you allow it, I'd like to look in your eyes and ask for forgiveness personally. I haven't responded yet. I need time to process, to understand my own feelings. But I kept the letter together with family photographs, and maybe that's a sign that, deep down, there's still hope for reconciliation. Meanwhile, I continue my life. Grateful for each new dawn, for each sunset I can contemplate from this porch, for each hug from my grandchildren, for each lowing of cattle returning to the corral. Life is made of ups and downs, victories and defeats, joys and sorrows. The important thing is not to give up, not to let yourself be defeated by discouragement or despair. If you made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please subscribe to the channel and leave your like. And if you really followed me to the end of this journey, comment below with the word resilience. Only those who watched will understand the meaning. I thank Comeback Stories channel for this opportunity to share my story. Who knows, maybe the next one will be even more similar to yours. A tight hug from this old man who learned it's never too late to start over, never too late to fight for what's right.